Hello, everybody. This is Philip Kay coming to you with his brand new podcast series, which is called Education and Spirituality Matters. And my third guest is Helen Strong. Good morning, Helen. It's afternoon here, but good morning to you.
Good morning, Phil. Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And thank you for coming. Now it's morning with you, so rather than me say who you are and where you are and so on, perhaps you could let the whole world know who you are and where you are, because where you are for me is a very interesting place, and there's not many people in the world in such a place. So over to you.
Okay, all right. I'll put you out of your misery then and tell everyone where I am. So my name is Helen, yes, and I'm up in the Outer Hebrides, so a set of islands, a chain of islands off the northwest coast of Scotland. And I moved here 5 years ago. I was previously living in Germany. And I'll give a little background about, well, probably the reason why you've invited me onto your podcast here, that I do have an educational background. And when I first met you, Phil, which was probably about a year ago, I think a little over a year ago, and I got to know you, I realized that our backgrounds are quite similar when it comes to the trajectory that we both took in terms of getting into education and moving abroad and teaching abroad. So yeah, like you, in my late 20s, I decided I needed a change of career direction and change of life. And so I trained to become a teacher of English as a foreign language. And I moved abroad. The country that I chose was Germany, because I could speak a little bit of German at the time. So I moved out there in 1999. I was 30 years old at the time, and I planned to kind of move around. That was like my first country, and then I was going to head east and maybe even get to Asia. And this was all in my head that I wanted to do, and I ended up staying in Germany because a year after I moved there, I met the man who would then later become my husband. And so I ended up actually staying for 20 years in Germany.
Oh, wow.
But because, like you, I'm very much a lifelong learner and I embrace learning, I also started, I did my diploma, I kept on learning, I did my diploma, I did my master's, I became a trainer of teachers, I started writing materials, I got into all of the things that you might do when you get into a new profession and you don't want to stagnate in that profession. So, I was always attending conferences, meeting people. We talked just before you pressed record there about how important it is to meet people and have the connection. And so I had a very, wide network and circle of people who I was in contact with in Germany. And then, towards, I don't know when it was, maybe 2015, 2016, something like that, I started feeling that something wasn't quite right in Germany, and that I needed to move to Scotland. And Scotland was just the place for me. It was just like, no question, it has to be Scotland. And somehow it had to be somewhere remote as well. I felt that I was being called, and we could get into this later when we come to the spirituality part of the conversation, that I really felt that I was being called to come to the Outer Hebrides. And so we did. I persuaded my husband to up sticks and move. He's German. And we sold up everything in Germany and moved out here 5 years ago. And we've been here since. And my life has completely changed. I'm not teaching anymore. I decided that I didn't want to teach anymore. My life has taken on a different direction. The purpose of my life now, I feel, is to live a life of self-sufficiency and independence from the system. This is one thing that I felt I needed to do. And so that's more or less what I'm doing now. So that's my life in a nutshell.
Fantastic. What's the name of your particular island you're on?
It's the Isle of Lewis. So the Outer Hebrides, we've got Lewis and Harris at the top, and then we've got the Uist, North and South Uist, and then there's Barra at the bottom, and I'm on the big one at the top. Although I'm not actually on the Isle of Lewis because I'm on a small island off the Isle of Lewis, which is called Great Bernera, wow. Which is reachable by a bridge. Oh. So yes, I am actually very remote.
In my head, and I've never been to Scotland, and I'm from England, but I've never crossed the border. In my head, Scotland doesn't particularly have good weather, because England doesn't have good weather, but it has this magnetic pull to me, and that's Scotland. My cousin lives in Scotland, but those islands that you talk about, they have an even more magnetic pull to me, and I love that idea of the wilderness. But so you're on a little island off one of the big islands of the whole Outer Hebrides Islands, which is just amazing. And are you closer to Glasgow or Reykjavik in Iceland?
Probably Glasgow.
So you're not that close to Iceland.
maybe close to the Faroe Islands.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, and the wilderness. So I can imagine that if I was in such a place, that I would not quite embrace the bad weather, but I would be able to accept it. Now, clearly, when you're in Scotland anywhere, but since you're even further up, you must get quite a lot of what we might call bad weather. How do you connect with that weather? Do you like all the weathers? Or... I
like all the weathers, yeah. I mean, just you talking about bad weather, I'm like, what do you mean by bad weather? You know, define what the weather is. Horizontal rain. Yes, we sometimes get horizontal rain. It's very windy up here. It's windier than other places that I've lived, because I grew up on the east coast of England. I come from the northeast of England, and I lived in Germany, you know, the south of Germany, in the middle of a continent where we didn't get a lot of winds, you know. But I love the coast. I love the I'm looking that way because I'm looking out the window, you know. I'm right in this remote place where I can just see the wilderness as I look out the window. And there's a sea loch, you know, right outside my house here, where we sometimes get dolphins coming by, and seals, and, you know, it's absolutely amazing. So I embrace the weather. It doesn't matter to me what kind of weather it is. And interestingly, last week, we had quite and this happened, I think, all over the UK, that we had an area of high pressure, and the temperatures like shot up, where it's April now. And so in April, you know, to have quite high temperatures. And when I say shot up, you know, they got to something like 16 degrees, which was very hot for me. And this is one thing that I noticed when I was living in, I mean, you're laughing because you're in Thailand. I just could not do the temperatures in Thailand. When I used to live in the south of Germany, you know, the summer temperatures would get way over 30 and sometimes even 40 degrees. And I just couldn't even leave the house. It was just uncomfortable for me to be there. For me, and my disposition, anything over 20 degrees is unbearably hot for me. So, you know, I love living where I live. And this is an interesting thing that I thought about, because I don't know what it is about people. Is it where you grew up initially, or is there something, you know, you grew up in England and yet you've lived in Thailand for 30 years, so you seem to be okay with that temperature. So, but I'm not. I grew up in England and I wanted to move to somewhere which was even colder and windier and, you know, more rugged. So do we each have this kind of disposition within us that draws us to certain geographical areas because of the climate of that area? This is a question to you. I don't know.
Well, the climate's a huge factor, and it's a very good question. And I personally think a big part of the answer comes from Ayurveda. Now, have you read much about Ayurveda? Which is
I have, because of you. You got me into it last year. Yeah,
it's beginning to finally get into the Western media and so on, and into the mind. But Ayurveda, for those who haven't heard about it or are not sure what it is, Ayurveda actually means in Sanskrit, because it comes from India, science of life. Now, the beautiful thing about Ayurveda is that it's the complete system of how to live in a harmonious way. Now, in the very basics of it are that there are 5 elements in the world, which you may well know. I remember it as SWAFE. So you've got space, water, air, fire, and earth. Now, when we're born, we have a unique combination of those 5 elements. So if most people will know about astrology, so there's 12 different star signs, and if you're born an Aries, then you usually have certain attributes and character and traits and so on. And if you're born a Taurus, then you get different ones. And they are indeed based on the fire signs, the earth signs, the water signs, and the air signs. So there are the 4, and then there's the space. And in Ayurveda, you've got 3 doshas. So that's D-O-S-H-A, and these doshas, the word translated to English is constitution. So now, I was born as an Aries, which is a fire sign, and my main dosha in Ayurveda is Pitta, and Pitta is mainly the fire element. So I think that the weather that we like depends upon the constitution that we were born with and the astrological profile that we have. Now, I'm going to get another lady onto my podcast soon, who I've increasingly been talking to online through the Telegram group in England, and she's been learning astrology. And I said to her that, you know, that I love the heat. I never liked the cold in England. I hated the cold winters when I was young, and the driving rain and the wind and the clouds and so on. It probably wasn't as bad as that. It's just that it was always bad weather when you were on holiday, but when you were working, that's when the good weather was. So I hated the winter, and she said to me, well, you are an Aries, and so you love to come out of the winter. You don't like the cold. And what she said was that, because I told her that when it gets to about April, and I mean April, May, June, March, April, May, and into June, I have noticed in the last few years that I have my best health, and that's when I play my best golf. So there's something, and I've noticed it every year now. So, you know, it's not about the diet. So there's nothing else I can attribute it to except this maybe astrological profile. And that's exactly what she said. She said that with your Aries profile, this is why you like it. Now, interestingly, in Thailand, in April, May, it's super hot. It's 35, 36, you can go up to 40 degrees. And it's swelteringly hot this year. But I still have my best health. And so I think it's relative. So because this was the time of year when I probably thrived in England, because we've come out of the winter, but, you know, I haven't lived in England for 30 years. So I'm imagining that when it got to March and April time, I began to wake up after a 5-month hibernation in the winter. So I think it's relative, and I think that's what's happened where I am over here. But for sure, I didn't like the cold. And when I came to Thailand, I love the heat. So I think you're right. I think it's a mixture, and there's a lot for us to learn on this, because it's super interesting. It's a mixture of our constitution we're born with, which comes from our parents and their mindset at the time, and our astrological profile, which is when we're born.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I hadn't noticed that thing about different times of the year where I might have more energy, but I'll start noticing that now. I have noticed that I'm feeling very tired right now in the springtime. Right. I'm feeling quite lethargic. So, you know, it might be as the temperatures are increasing, my body's kind of like, no, I want the cold again. I don't know.
So what's your star sign?
My star sign is Virgo.
I'll ask my friend. Because if you don't like the heat, and as it warms up, that might be what then you tend to have your less healthy time or your less energetic time. So I think there's a lot to explore for everybody, you know, between when we're born and the times of year when we thrive more than other times. Yeah. More energy or less.
That's interesting. Yeah, now that you've pointed that out, I'm gonna maybe keep a journal and see when I'm feeling more lethargic and more active.
We'll need at least 3 years, so I'll come back in 3 or 4 years time.
Okay. I just want to pick up, Phil, on something that you said before, because you talked about you know, when I said that I felt I was being called to the Western Isle, to the Outer Hebrides. Yeah. And you talked about can't remember what you said exactly, but there's something about you know, the Western Isles, the Outer Hebrides are I can't remember what you said now, a particular place. Sorry?
About the wilderness there, or near Reykjavik?
No, about a place. I was going to mention the Callanish standing stones.
Oh, never heard of them.
Yeah, so you've heard of Stonehenge.
Yes.
Yeah, so the standing stones up in the Outer Hebrides are called Callanish, and it's basically they look the same as they're Scotland's answer to Stonehenge. Apparently older than Stonehenge. Wow. And when I look out, one side of my window, I could see them. There's actually an island in between our house and the standing stones. But if that island wasn't there, I could see the standing stones from my house. So there's certainly, going back to the meaning of the Scottish Islands in a spiritual context. There's something there as well, and I'm not sure whether that was also what pulled me towards the Western Isles as well. I just wanted to throw that in there because you mentioned something about it.
It's really interesting how we can, I've heard this from many people, that we feel pulled to do something or go somewhere with no apparent reasonable or logical reason for it. And I think that we can only notice this if we've got to a point in our life where we're aware of everything. So, for example, the weather thing, when I changed my diet in 2008, and I was now really almost exclusively only eating healthy foods, and I wasn't eating any bad foods. Slowly but surely, I attributed my health up and downs with the food I was eating, because I might go back to England and my diet would dip a bit because I was meeting lots of other people. But when you've got a good diet, and when all the other factors, and you've sort of detoxed your body to a degree, which might take a few years when you change your diet to be healthy, then you start to notice factors of going down in energy or up in energy. And then when you notice that, you start to notice all kinds of things. Now, and then, so when you were pulled there, and why, you've noticed that you were pulled there. You had no particular reason to go there. So I find all that quite interesting to pursue. So, in a similar vein, when I came to Thailand in 1991, I don't know if I've told you this story, but I'll tell all our viewers. That wasn't my first choice. But what I wanted to do was to go away for a year and travel for a year. And my first choice was China, because for some reason, I'd always been interested in China. Now, this is 1990 when I was planning the idea. And I finally went in 91. But when it came down to the reality that I was definitely going to go, and I wasn't just dreaming, China was too difficult to get a visa for a few months. So then a friend had been to Thailand. He told me his stories of Thailand. And, okay, that'll do. That's nearby. I'll just go to Thailand instead. And while I had been, I'd been to Dubai and I'd been to Bahrain, which is technically Asia, but nowhere near what we British people think of Asia as. So I'd never been anywhere in that part of Asia. So anyway, finally the time came, and me and my friend, we took an Aeroflot flight because it was cheaper. So we went via Moscow, and then from Moscow to Bangkok. Now, I can remember this so clearly. When the aeroplane lands and it makes that sort of, you can hear that sort of squirting sound as the rubber hits the tarmac. At that instant, in other words, that's the very second that the plane has now, that I've actually bodily arrived in Thailand and in real Asia. And in that very split second, a thought flashed across my mind: I've come home. I'm home. How? Where could that thought come from? Anyway, so excited, it came and went, and that was the end of it. And then, of course, 3 or 4 months later, the travel money's run out, and I managed to get myself an English teaching job, which I'd like to touch on a little bit. And the rest is history. I found and discovered that I love teaching, and I love Thailand, and everything suited me, and now I had a new life. And as it happens, here I am 30 odd years later, and I had indeed arrived home. But so how was it that I had that flashing thought? Yeah,
and something actually very similar happened to me, Phil, because I came to the Western Isles in 2010 on a motorbike tour.
Yeah.
And we came around this corner and I saw this whitewashed stone cottage with a thatched roof and the beach in the background. And as we came around this corner, because I was in the lead, you know, people were behind me, and I came around this corner and I just saw this house. And like you, I wouldn't call it a thought, I would call it a feeling. Something hit me in my stomach, which said, you're going to be living in a house like that someday.
Oh, yeah.
And that was in 2010.
Right.
And it was like, you know, the thought, and I got off the motorbike and I was just looking at it, you know, I took pictures of it and I printed it out when I got home and stuck it on the wall, you know, as this place, this is where my future home is going to be. But I just thought in 2010, I've got no idea how to realize this dream. And it took me, I would say, the seed was planted. This is how I word it. The seed is planted, it was planted in 2010. And by 2015, it had started growing inside me, that it was actually getting quite uncomfortable, like a tree was growing inside me. And I was like, I've got to get this, I've got to release this tree by actually moving to the Outer Hebrides. And so from 2015, I started keep coming over and looking for this perfect whitewashed stone cottage with a thatched roof and 2 chimneys on the side. And I didn't find the actual house in the end, but I just knew that, you know, something had been planted in 2010, which said, Helen, you know, your future destiny is to live in the Outer Hebrides. And then I just had to, it was like, you know, I had been told to do something and my brain was just like, you've got to do it, because something within me was just, it would have torn me up. You know, they say that you have to do the thing that you have to do. Otherwise, if you don't do it, that thing that you have to do will kill you or will, you know, destroy you. And it's true. I felt like I just felt completely torn. And I was like, I have to get to the Outer Hebrides in whatever way that I do it. So this feeling that you got, you know, as the plane touched down was probably similar to the feeling that I got. Yes, this is where I need to be. And I think that, you know, if people can connect with themselves so much that they recognize that, because it was very fleeting with you said it was very fleeting, and with me it was this feeling, you know, like a punch in the stomach, but people need to recognize that and to say that there was a reason for that and I need to do something, otherwise you won't be happy.
That's amazing, and kudos to your husband for coming with you.
I managed to persuade him, yeah.
I mean, you know, that stops a lot of people. I mean, maybe they don't explore it enough with their life partner, but you know, a lot of people, I've met a lot of people who would like to emigrate or move somewhere else in the world, but either their husband or their wife doesn't want to go. Now, to what extent they tried to persuade them, I don't know. But you know, I mean, when I came here, I was single, so you know, that was fine. But it is amazing because we've got a huge world. But I increasingly now notice these like downloads from the universe, if you like.
Yeah.
You would call. Now, before we move on, what I was going to say was that I can only imagine, because being fairly near the equator, in Chiang Mai where I am, we do get 3 seasons, whereas in Bangkok where I used to live, it was 2 seasons, and in Singapore it's only 1 season. But on the equator, everything's the same. Whereas where you are, you've obviously got longer and shorter days, but I can just imagine that the lighting, just because I love nature, I can only imagine the lighting that you get in Scotland, the various kinds of lighting. I mean, I'm a photographer as well. I think it would be a photographer's dream to spend a year where you are, to capture the same image or the same scene, but in multiple different ways of being lit up. Is that right?
That's right, and lots of artists come up here because of the light. You know, so there's a lot of artists that move up here and just, you know, sit and paint and you know, the photography up here is amazing as well. We also got the Northern Lights. We see the Northern Lights. We got those a couple of weeks ago. Wow. Yeah, so yeah, the light is magnificent here. Okay,
so here you go. Before this COVID thing came along, which, you know, incredibly is over 3 years ago. Before that, part of my new venture in life, which is yet to fully take off, but it will do. And the reason I left my official teaching job, although I want to continue teaching, and left my job to write my book, was that if I could earn my own money, then I could go wherever I wanted to and earn so long as I've got my camera and my laptop, I can do my work. Now, one of my dreams was to come to Scotland, somewhere in Scotland, but it's before I met you, and so I wasn't thinking about the islands. And I wanted to get somewhere, and I wanted to rent a little cottage, and it had to be about a mile's walk from a golf course, from a beach, and from a local pub in a local village. And I wanted to be there for 3 or 4 months, probably like March time, when you've got the longer days and you could play the golf and so on. And in this 4 months, I was going to enjoy living like a cottager in beautiful nature, and I was going to write a book, write one of my books while I was there, and then I was going to write part of another book would be describing my experience of living in this cottage for 3 or 4 months. So do they have any such cottages in the Outer Hebrides that I could go and
Yes.
live there? Probably no golf.
They do. They do, but we have a bed and breakfast. So you're also welcome, but I don't know if that's what you're wanting to recreate. You probably want this little stone cottage, and we're about we're almost an hour away from the nearest golf course, so it's not that far. Not that
golf. I mean, when you have dreams, by the time you might realize them, it's changed, hasn't it? Or...
Yeah, I mean, that was exactly, you know, what I was saying about the cottage, that you know, I knew that I wanted to be in the Outer Hebrides, but in the end I had to give up on the dream of the cottage and just buy a normal house, you know, which we've created into this beautiful place, which we've turned into a bed and breakfast. So sometimes, you know, there are certain parts of your dream where you just have to kind of make compromises because you can't have everything that you want. You know, and as long as you achieve I think the main part of the dream, then yeah, you will get there. So, you know, reality kicks in and it's like, well, okay, well, you can have, you know, I've got 5 things that I want to have. Okay, well, you can have 3 of them. Which 2 do you not want? Which 2 are not as important? So yeah, but it would be possible.
Okay, so that leads me on to the question that I was going to ask you, but a slightly different question. So you wanted 5 things and you only got 3. So if you were worrying about or bemoaning the 2 you didn't get, then you wouldn't be enjoying the 3 that you did get, because you would be too focused on what you haven't got. Now, to me, this starts to cut to the nub of spiritual living, which is acceptance. And I remember a few years ago, it suddenly came to me. I think I was having to deal with the government, which is not my favorite activity, because it's red tape and everything and so on. But and I came up with a little slogan for myself. The moment that you, let me get this right, the moment you accept your limitations in life, those limitations disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it was is that it's the resistance of something that causes us our limitation. We think it's what we haven't got and something's gone wrong out there. But in fact, it's our connection or our reaction to what's going on out there. And as soon as you accept a problem or accept something, its power over you just simply sorts of melts away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's the same. It's not just with limitations, it's with everything. You know, if you have an emotion that you want to get rid of, you know, like anger or fear or irritation or something like this, accept that you have the first step to getting rid of a problem is recognizing there is a problem. So, you know, accepting I get angry or I get irritated or I get fearful, and then that's part of the way, and then that dissipates, you know, the emotion itself dissipates. The fact that you've just recognized that you have it takes the power away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens is that when the trigger's out there, isn't it? Something out there or somebody out does something and it's not to our liking. So for example, we get angry. Now, we direct our anger at the trigger out there, at the person or the thing or the bad luck or whatever. So we direct our anger out there. And so we are angry and we've become the anger. But we're blaming the out there. Whereas in reality, the problem is not actually out there. The problem is our reaction to the trigger out there. And as you say, when you notice your emotional reaction, this is the end of its power over you, because you can see it as if it's somebody else's, you know, detached from it. And that breaks the hold, yeah?
And one question to ask yourself if something triggers you is, what is it about that thing that has triggered me? I think that is an easy question to get rid of it, because then you're not directing your anger on the thing that's triggered you. You know, said, okay, this has happened. Why did I get triggered about it? What is it about it that's triggered something in me? And then you take this journey in yourself to find out, why is it triggered me? Because it wouldn't trigger the next person. You know, or you observe somebody else getting very angry about something, and you think, well, just forget about it. It's nothing, but they can't. And you know, so it works with all of us, I think. And so being able to observe other people getting triggered by things which don't trigger you, or you're observing yourself getting triggered by things which don't trigger other people, I think, you know, tells you that the trigger is not the problem.
And what you're alluding to there for all the listeners is that when we observe this, that's the beginning of the solution. That's the beginning of the end of the problem, the observation process. Now, I always like to say, observe others and learn about yourself. Observe yourself and learn about others. And I think that observing, which we can only do with an aware state of mind, because observing is watching what's going on. Yeah? So it might be watching somebody else out there, but it's also the ability to use your mind's eye, and look inside your own mind. And when we're observing, we're not judging whether it's good or bad. We're not saying we shouldn't be angry, or we should be angry, or how terrible of me for getting angry. But we're in the observation, we're just seeing what's happening. Like a bird just flew past there. Doesn't mean it's good or bad. So in that observation, we have to have an awareness of what's going on, either out there or in here. And then, as you say, when you say to yourself, well, what's triggered me and why has that happened? That's the reflection process. Yeah. So having observed our anger, and then, okay, well, I got angry either during it or after it, doesn't matter. But if we accept that we got angry, okay, why did I get angry? Because she did it to me. Well, yeah, but maybe I did something to her, you know, that triggered her. In that reflection process, so I call it OAR, which is observe with awareness and then reflect. And so I think personally that that's the #1 tool in life, or spiritual tool, for evolving and for unenslaving ourselves from our emotional reactions. And I think that opens up more and more space and energy for us to become spiritual, which to me is just living in harmony with other people on the planet.
Yeah,
I think that observation is a seriously useful thing for humans to learn to do.
And you also touched on something else there about saying, you know, it's not good or bad that you had this emotion. You know, you got angry, and then you might want to reproach yourself for getting angry, but it just happened. Going back to what you were saying about the weather, you know, the good and bad weather. I've stopped saying that weather is good or bad. So I've stopped saying that lots of things are good or bad. You know, it's just like, it's just weather. It's rain. Rain is very good because it waters the plants. Wind is good. You know, all of these things are very good. But other people might find them bad. But you know, it's neither good nor bad. It just is. And so whatever the weather is on a particular day, it doesn't trigger me anymore. See, probably because I'm in the place where I'm suited to my climate. But
I think that is, in a nutshell, that's what spirituality is it is what it is. And okay, if you don't like something, then we may be able to change it peacefully or non-violently. And that's the beauty of being human. We've got tools and ways of actually shaping our environment, proactively changing or shaping our environment. I think that's probably what you did in your classrooms when you were teaching English, because that's what I did. I create the environment in my classroom so that it's conducive to learning. It emotionally supports all the members, but it cognitively challenges them. And in this way, people feel safe and comfortable and like to get on with each other. And now in that nice supportive environment, now people can really be challenged with lots of tasks, and they can really delve into themselves and look into their beliefs and so on. And that's what I was going to say, just to close that bit, is that if people are listening here, Western world in particular, everybody's living in the fast lane, too fast, always busy, no time to reflect. Because if you're not very good at observing, if you can create time and space and reflect, just remember your day. So through reflecting, you can become good at observing, but through observing, you can become good at reflecting. And I think so you can come at it from two ways. But what you're saying there is fundamental to reducing the number of problems in our life. And that is, yeah, that's what I said, you know, when I said I used to call it bad weather when I was in England. Well, that was before I learned all this stuff. So it would have been bad weather. But now I would probably, okay, I'll dress up properly. It's 45-degree rain. I'll get the warm clothes on and out I go. And I'll really enjoy it because that hot cup of tea when I come home is going to taste even better.
Exactly. There's no such thing as bad weather. There's only or the wrong weather. There's only the wrong clothing or the wrong conditions.
And the wrong reaction.
Yes.
Weather.
Yeah. You don't go out when it's blowing a storm. You know, you just stay at home until the storm passes. You know, so you need to react. Yeah.
Unless you're one of those hurricane chasers in America where they get in the car with all their cameras and everything and chasing the hurricanes and filming them. But
wow, respect. You have to have respect, I think, for the weather, for any part of the elements.
Well, I think that's living spiritually as well, because you're in the moment, aren't you? You're connected to the environment that you're in. I think that's great. Now, I want to ask you what a lot of people might think is an awkward question, but I don't think it'd be awkward for you. It's the one question that I had down here that I wanted to definitely ask you. And it's not being discussed in society, but I sense that more and more people are ready to start discussing it again. It's a 3-letter word in the English language, and it's got a capital G and it ends in D. And of course, we grow up as kids. When I grew up as a kid, that you know, he, not she, he, and he was in a chair up above with a long flowing beard or whatever, and so on. But more and more people are now recognizing there's something more powerful than they themselves. So can I ask you, Helen, and I think that you had some experience, and I can't remember what it was, but what does God mean to you, and how does God impact in your life?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this because I had a big experience last year. So 2022 was last year. Being atheist all of my life, most of my adult life. You know, I'm sure that I did believe in it until about the age of 8, I think. And I felt that there was something going on there, and then something changed. I didn't understand what we were being taught in school about the Bible stories. And you know, materialism and consumerism set in as you do, and you know, all of these different, as you go through your teenage years. And I didn't grow up in a very Christian place. You know, we had school assemblies in which, you know, the teacher would read something from the Bible, but it was never explained, and we weren't allowed to ask questions. So you know, I think that was part of the problem. And also this, you know, this image of this God, big man with a white beard sitting on a throne in the sky, was just like, I just don't get that at all. And so I turned against God. You know, I admit that I turned against God. And so for most of my adult life, I was atheist. And then towards the time, actually, when I started looking to move to the Western Isles, I felt a pull towards, there's something more than this. There's got to be something more than this. And why is this thing in, you know, this seed growing in me? Where does this come from? Because this can't be explained by the material world that we live in, the 5 senses. It's just, there's got to be something else. So I tried, you know, looking at all of these different spirituality places, you know, Hinduism, Buddhism, you know, all of that, thinking, because I refused to go down the God path, you know, because of the experience that I had. So, you know, I tried searching all over the place for the answers, you know, to these questions. And after I moved here, I started a podcast in the year that we know as 2020. I start, you know, when everybody was working from home and staying at home, I started a podcast. And one of the guests that I interviewed on this podcast, I just asked her this question. She also moved to a Scottish island and felt called to do that. And so I said, you know, what was it? What's your relationship with spirit? And she just went off on, she went off on a complete one about God. And I'm like, whoa, I need to know more about this. So after the interview, I stayed in touch with her, and I had, regular contact with her, and because I wanted to explore her experience with God. Hers was very similar to mine, around about the same age, because she was a few years older than me, that she also had this experience where she just atheist for most of her life, and then suddenly found God. And so I wanted to find out a little bit more about that, but something was calling me. It wasn't, I think, previously I might have just said, oh, she's weird, she's talking about God, and, but something was calling me to find out a little bit more about what she was saying. And so we continued the conversation online for quite a while. And then I went out to visit her in the summer of last year, and she just helped me to find God. And I was converted overnight, and I've never looked back. And it's had such a major change, effect on my life, that I just feel so much more at peace. I feel that I have a much bigger understanding of what is going on in the world, and the evil that exists in the world, which I didn't know before, and understanding why this evil exists, and being able to deal with it, not to crumble. I think, previously, if I'd found out how evil this world actually is, I would have just cracked up and said, what's the point? But now that I've understood, gone down various rabbit holes at the same time as having this journey towards God, it's helped keep that grounding, that I need to say, yes, the world is not what I thought it was. This illusion that I was living for 50 years of my life is not actually real. But able to say that without my foundations being completely shaken and not being able to manage. So yes, this lady really helped me to do that. I do feel that you need help as well. You need another possibly human intervention to help you with this journey, because we are human and we're trying to navigate this earth, in these bodies. But ultimately, I don't need anybody else to tell me, like the pastor or a preacher or anybody like that, to tell me how to speak to God. I speak to God directly now. I read the Bible myself. The Bible speaks to me. I don't need anybody else to tell me how to speak to God, which I think is how we were taught as children and how society teaches us. You can't have this direct connection with God. You have to have somebody else interpret the Bible for you, and you have to sit together. And so that's where I think that I got with my relationship with God. And like I say, it's just put me in such a peaceful place, and yet not a naive place where I was before. They say ignorance is bliss. I don't agree. No. Ignorance is not bliss. You reach bliss when you know what is going on in the world, and yet you can deal with it.
Ignorance is bliss. I think ignorance in our age is downright dangerous. Deadly even. Fascinating story. I'm going to ask you what the God actually means to you in a minute, but let me think what I was going to say from what you were saying. You mentioned the evil, which is what got me on my own journey back it was before the internet, so I think it was the mid-90s, and I had been reading the books about what the Anglo Empire was doing around the world, and the Franco empires were doing around the world. And I probably, because of my birth chart or whatever, I have a keen sense of justice and fairness, and I hated the injustice, the inequity, and the sheer wanton violence and cruelty. And then I read about the Cultural Revolution in China in the 76 to 76. I read about Cambodia because I'm next door to Cambodia. I read about the violence and brutalities in Burma, and so I was reading all of this stuff, and I was I was living in a beautiful life. I had a beautiful job. I was going down to the islands for my holidays. It was my best decade. But I was getting enraged, and my rage would, I can only describe it, it would feel like my limbs were made of steel or metal. And it just had a horrible feeling in me. And I don't know how long this lasted, a year or 2 or 3 years. I don't really know. And it only happened when I was reading the books. But it was something I wanted to, I didn't want it to happen anymore. And then at some point, I realized that I was getting angry, but all the crimes were still being committed. So my anger and my rage wasn't making any difference to the world, but it was making a difference to me. And that's when I began my own, I didn't look at it at that time, but that's when I began my spiritual journey. And being in a Buddhist country, I went into one of the bookshops and there was no shortage of books and Buddhism books and Dalai Lama and all these kinds of things. And I bought a book, and I'm going to mention this book to everybody. It was called A Treatise in Revolutionary Psychology. And it was by Samael Aun Weor. I'm going to put it in the link below, in the comments, in the description when we finish the video. But this book got me really thinking, and I think that was the beginning of my spiritual journey. And then at some point, I accepted. So this is the evil you mentioned. Now, bringing it back to the God story, I went back to England. I don't know when it was. It was probably about 98 or 99. And as always, I went down and stayed with my mum in Rye in Sussex. She died in 2001, but I went to see her, and we used to play a lot of cards, and she had made the best breakfast, and it was always good. It was always great to see her. And then suddenly I said to her, Mum, I've discovered who God is. And she looked at me, and she had her cigarette and her long cigarette holder, puffing away. Oh, who's that, darling? I said, it's me. It's two letters, not 3. Capital F, please. And that might need some explaining for the readers, but maybe not. But so let me rebound to you. And you discovered God. And of course, God is just 3 words. It is literally 3 letters. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to say. You mentioned that you need the help of somebody else. Well, a big hit job has been done on us, I think. And a lot of knowledge has been kept away from us, including the evil that goes on. And and I think part of this was the denial of God and the promotion of atheism, which taken to its natural extension becomes communism and Marxism, which seems to be invading the Western world now. So, God is whatever God is. And when you've talked about discovering God, and I discovered God, and anybody that discovers God, it's not a 3-letter word that we're discovering, and it's not what somebody else has defined the God to be, but we've all found something that seems to have a very similar effect on us. And that's the key thing. So can I ask you, when you found God, are you able to describe using English language what it is you found? So to help the listeners.
Yeah, I think it was more because I consider myself a novice to this. I mean, from now on, I think the language that we're going to use is going to be very insufficient to describe what we're talking about. So I'm going to use this language, but it's probably not going to come across very well. And so I think that what helped me discover God, and like you say, it's in all of us. God is in all of us. Was learning more about who Jesus was. And so I had, with my 3D senses, my human body, I was able to grasp onto another human body in the form of Jesus Christ to say this is the embodiment of God, and then to read what he was saying. And so my friend helped me through Jesus to discover the connection with God. So that's why I feel, I needed my friend to help me find Jesus, to then help me find God. Because of the 50 years of programming that I'd had, which, had severed the connection with God, I needed, I think, this stepping stone to get back to it. Maybe if you've been brought up in that environment, you automatically have this connection, and so you don't have the same experience as me, but that is my experience. But the overriding connection with God, I can't explain it with words. Words are just inadequate.
Let me ask you a couple of guiding questions to try and get somewhere, because I agree with you that language is all we've got to share. And so some people may be on the path. So if we can help them. Now, so is God a person?
No.
Is God, is it a process? Is it a thing?
It's a thing. What does thing mean?
Well, it's a material object.
No, I don't know. I don't think it is. It's so huge that it's nothing that my mind can even comprehend.
You know what I think it is?
What?
It's got 4 letters. So we've got 2 letters me, 3 letters God, and 4 letters is life. I actually think that God is life. And so the amazing thing is that in order to connect with life, you have to go beyond our intellectual thinking mind. You have to sense it or feel it. And so if I read, I haven't read the Bible, but I've read lots of quotes. But if at that time, when I started getting excited that I found God and that it was me, because if God is life, I am a part of life and I am life. And therefore, if God is life, that means that I'm God. And another word is consciousness. So I was looking, we've got 2 ducks on the farm. You were talking about your chickens. We've got 2 ducks on the farm. And the ducks, you know, we get 1 duck egg every day. Now, when I'm down at the tea house, every morning I feed the ducks. Now, they used to be really frightened and everything, but now I can just literally put the duck food in their bowl, and then I can be 2 meters away, and I sit down because I love animals, and I watch the ducks eating. And then, you know, the necks are going like this, and I almost become at one with the duck.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, and then the thinking mind comes in, I can never eat duck again. But least of all these ducks, because I've seen the life force, I've seen the consciousness, whatever you want to call it, the life in these ducks. They are, you know, as you say, it's very difficult to deal with language, but when we're presented with a man with a beard in a chair up in the sky, this is part of blocking us from having a connection with God, isn't it? I think, you know, and while we can't all explain it, my best effort at not explaining it, but at sharing with people how you might find God yourself is that it's literally life. And the best place to see life is out in the nature, watching animals or whatever. Now, just on that, just to finish, one of my friends on Facebook, she's just moved into the countryside in, I think it's Bedfordshire, and she posted up a video. Oh my word, where are we? April, you're in the spring, aren't you? And on this video, she did it was about 1 minute, and she circled around, and I saw all these beautiful English trees, all clearly just blooming and flowering and getting leaves and being born again for a new season. And the fields, and there was lots of deep blue sky and fluffy white clouds, and the bird song, the noise of all the birds. This was the archetypal English natural scene, sounds and sights, and it was just beautiful. It was 2D. It was coming through to me on my computer, but oh, what a, I mean, that was life. That is life. That is God, and me being connected with it, at one with it. To me, that's God. And when you find that, that's when you say, yes, well, then you can see everything for what it is. So you can't kid yourself any longer that evil's really not evil or whatever. You have now been presented with the world, and there it is in all its evil and goodness. And in the accepting of it, we are now able to transcend the effects of that evil that we see. And I think that if I can transcend that evil, and therefore I will never be that evil, and if you do the same because you found God, and if millions and millions and billions of people find God in the same way, does that not chase the evil out of town?
Well, it seems to be, because, you know, from what I understand, that good and love, I mean, you called it life, another word could be love as well. I've heard people say God is love. And it's very similar, you know, to what you were saying, you watching the ducks and I watch my hens, and I just have so much love for them, you know, and I feel at one with them. That goodness is the absence of evil. So yes, if we all get into this place where we're only good, we're only at one with life, and we love everything, and you know yourself when you have this feeling, you know, watching videos of animals doing cute things and doing what they should be doing. I certainly get this feeling in my stomach. It brings tears to my eyes because I have so much love. It's like an outpouring of love towards these other living creatures. And as long as you're filled with this love, evil does not have a place. So yes, if we all got to that place where all we felt was love, then evil would not exist.
Well, I think that's exactly it. So evil is there only as a borrowed it's only there because of an absence of something. Now, I might add that that it's not just animals; it's humans as well. When I see, like on, you know, when you see these violinists who play amazing stuff and
babies doing cute things, and
babies, musicians, sports people, even people just living in a conscious part of their life, having just a full conversation in mindfulness, out and about, visiting art galleries and just being there and enjoying themselves. And even in my classrooms, you know, when I was teaching the teachers, sometimes I would almost get an out-of-body experience because I was listening to them talking, and it felt as if I was them. It almost felt as if I was sitting inside them and I was them.
Yeah.
And I think that this happens when you are so invested in the current moment. And when you are, you listen carefully and you are engaged and interacted and interconnected with whatever is coming into your senses. And I think for me, that's life, that's love, and that's God.
Yeah. Good. A good way of describing that. Yeah.
Well, I know we could talk for ages about this. We're coming up to sort of the hour mark, and it feels like that might be a very good sort of way to start coming out of it. What, there's something else I was going to ask you. I made a note. I think, well, on the let me take you right back to the beginning when you talked about learning, and I made a note, lifelong learning, and I think this is connected to God. When I taught the teachers, I was teaching them how to be skillful learners, and in the becoming of the skillful learner, they thoroughly enjoyed their learning experience, which was 3 hours long. So they found the joy and the reward and the fulfilling nature of being in the learning zone of mind, which puts you into the conscious mode, which in effect makes you God, if what we're saying is how we've described it. So what happens is, and this is denied us in the schooling, which I'm really rabbiting on a lot now, but in the school systems, they don't even teach us how to learn. We don't know how to learn. But when we discover the joy of learning, we become, and I wanted to see if this fitted what's happened with your life, we become lifelong learners. Learning becomes an everyday part of our existence. And in that learning, it's not that I need to learn knowledge, it's that I need to be doing the learning. I want to be in that activity. And then I may get some knowledge and I may become more knowledgeable. But it's the perpetual upgrading and upgrading of my understanding that counts. So when I'm wrong, or when I make a mistake, rather than getting all self-conscious and defending myself, oh no, I know everything and all that sort of thing, it's brilliant. It doesn't happen often, but that's only because I've done so much learning. But when you're wrong and when you make a mistake, these are learning episodes, aren't they?
Definitely.
And I think that, you know, lifelong learning is your connection to God, because I think it connects you within you, and it connects you with life and everything out there. And it might be nature, it might be a duck or a chicken, it might be in a coffee shop, it might be an art gallery, it might be in any mundane place. I mean, even when I'm walking down the street or cycling in Thailand, you know, somebody comes my way, I smile at them, they smile at me, God. Just for a minute, it's God.
Exactly. It's the connection, the energetic connection between the two of you. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
no, I agree with that. And I think, you know, on the subject of learning, it's useful to always be asking yourself, what am I learning from this experience? You know, as I'm having this conversation with you, you know, it's just flowing in whatever direction it's meant to go. And when we close this conversation, I'll be going away and thinking about it all day. What did I take from that? What did I learn from that? And you know, whatever adverse thing happens to you, or whatever piece of information you have, it's okay. Get the resistance out of the way. We talked about resistance before, because that's not helpful. What am I taking from it? What am I learning from it? And I just feel that my whole life has been one learning journey. You know, this thirst for knowledge, or for learning. Sometimes I went down wrong paths, but wrong is not really wrong, you know, bad, because I went down a path and maybe it didn't lead anywhere, but I learned something from it. That's not the path to go down. Yeah. You know, so whatever you do, if you always ask the question, like reflection on it, and asking you, what did I learn from that? What did I take from that? Then that is complete, always lifelong learning.
Yeah, I think, and also very top level sportsmen and business people, sportswomen, business people, businessmen, businesswomen, they've often speak about their lives and how much they learned from when they lost and felt terrible. Yeah. And so on. And then some businessmen, they you know, they're flying and suddenly they go bankrupt and then they start again.
Well, they say when things all go according to plan, then what have you learned?
Exactly.
You know, because it might have just been luck, or you know, you might not have learned. So when things go wrong, that's when you learn how not to do things, or how to do things in a different way.
And you're learning when you're having different experiences. And on the flip side, a lot of people who live in fear are not having any new experiences. They're fear of having experiences and we live in this, what I call the culture of certainty, where everybody goes around saying they know everything. But as soon as you know everything, you're dead. That's it. You're not open to evolution anymore, are you? So you know, this culture of certainty is turning people into the walking dead.
Yeah, and coupled with that, you're not allowed to admit that you were wrong either. You know, you're not allowed to say, well, you said something different a week ago, and it's like, well, I had different information then. That's why.
Fear of looking stupid, or one of the millions of things I learned from reading Osho books was, he says, I'm inconsistent, and I love being inconsistent.
You know, you can't be precious about this piece of knowledge that you know, the opinion that you had a year ago. It's like, well, that was my opinion a year ago, I have to stick to it. Well, no, new information has come along, you've developed, you've increased your wisdom, hopefully, if you've been learning, and therefore you may have a different opinion. I think that is much more wise than, you know, sticking to an opinion, an old-fashioned opinion.
See, that's another thing that's going on in the world at the moment, is that it somehow, which may be a consequence of everybody getting rid of God, is there can be no disagreements. But disagreement is on the journey to learning, isn't it? Because you may say something, I disagree with you. Well, why do you say that, Helen? And I say this, and then why, you know, and then together, and I may end up still disagreeing with you, but at least I've now got a different viewpoint, and we didn't fall out. And then I may go away, and that evening or the next day, I think Helen was right, actually, you know, and so on. And so I think if we're in a mindset that we want to be a learner, then we've got open minds, open hearts, and that's when we will find God. That's when God comes in. Yeah.
Well, that's how I let him in. Yeah.
Him?
I was resistant. In fact, I say him. But yeah.
It's what we're told, isn't it?
It's what we were told. But I was resisting for so long, you know, and when I opened my heart and said, you know, I'm going to learn more about it, then
we were made resistant. We were made resistant by our upbringing and our, you know, our schooling. We were made resistant. I got lucky in the respect that I emigrated accidentally, and as soon as you get into a new place, I know you'll know this from moving around. You're in a new place, now you learn more because it's done differently, different weather, everything's different. And so you've got more experiences and more learning, and that fuels more and more and more, and that's how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
We should probably, I think we've been talking a good hour. I'm trying to keep these podcasts to about an hour, so we might sort of think about calling it a day there.
Sure.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I always enjoy my conversations with you, Phil.
Yes, I enjoy them as well, Helen. And when I get to, I'm hoping to get to England later this year. I've got to get my learning I've got to get my course underway, and I'll contact you shortly on that. But once I've done my first online course, the money and time pressure's off. I'm coming back to England because I haven't been there since year 0 began in 2020. I called it year 0. I'd want to come for about 2 months, and if I do, I would like to make a trek all the way up to Lewis.
You'd be very welcome.
And I'll bring my camera. I'll write some poems.
I'm looking forward to it. I hope you manage it.
Excellent. Well, I will do. It's just the timeline I don't know about, because I have complete faith in the universe that everything will operate as it should.
Exactly. God willing.
Okay, Helen. Fantastic. Thank you very much for an illuminating conversation on my 3rd podcast. And I hope you viewers, wherever you may be, have thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. I shall endeavour to get another number 4 out next week. I have a few people lined up. Until then, everybody, and Helen, I wish you a fantastic rest of the day and the rest of the week, wherever you are, whenever you listen to it. Bye-bye, Helen. Bye-bye, readers, listeners.
Bye-bye.